Hi, I'm Annaliesa. And 5 years ago, my parents kicked me out of the house because my sister's fiancé told a lie. Not just a misunderstanding, an orchestrated attack, built to erase me. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. They didn't even ask me if it was true. No questions, no hesitation, just exile. And now, after years of silence, after I rebuilt everything without them, they want back in. What changed? Or maybe the real question is, why do they think they still get to come back? Would you let them? It should have been a perfect evening. White lanterns swayed in the warm Tennessee breeze, a jazz trio played soft melodies under the oaks, and everything at Celine's engagement party looked like a magazine spread. But there was a tension in the air that clung to my skin like humidity, thick, invisible, and impossible to ignore. I wasn't sure if it was the way Jacek watched me from across the yard, or the way Celine seemed suddenly stiff when I tried to hug her. Something had shifted. I could feel it long before anyone said a word. Later, during dinner, I caught Jacek whispering something to my mother. Doreen's face didn't flinch, just a slow nod, eyes flicking toward me like I was the subject of a quiet joke. From that moment on, the tone at the table changed. People stopped meeting my eyes. Their smiles were tight, their laughter cut short when I entered a conversation. It was like watching a curtain being drawn, slowly, silently, but firmly. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the engagement stress had everyone on edge. But that illusion shattered the moment I overheard my aunt muttering behind me. "It's always the quiet ones. Never thought she'd be so brazen." Confused, I approached my mother after the cake was cut, pulling her aside near the kitchen entrance. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. "Jacek told us what you did," she said. "And honestly, I'm ashamed." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "He said you've been inappropriate, that you've made him uncomfortable, that you crossed a line." Her voice was cold, like she'd already tried and convicted me. "That's not true," I said instantly. "He's lying." "A man doesn't lie about something that humiliating," she snapped. The rest of the night passed in a fog. Conversations swirled around me, but I wasn't part of them. I stood alone in the background of group photos, felt myself being cropped out before the pictures were even taken. Marvin barely looked at me. Celine? She acted like I didn't exist. I confronted Jacek, cornered him near the drinks table. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't even blink. "You brought this on yourself," he said flatly, then walked away, sipping his wine like we were discussing the weather. The next morning, I stayed behind to help clean up. That's when Minerva, our longtime housekeeper, more family than half the blood in that house, took me by the wrist and led me to the pantry. "I shouldn't say this," she whispered. But I heard him, night before the party, on the patio with Celine. He told her if she didn't stop comparing herself to you, he'd make sure you were out of the picture. My breath caught. He said that? I've worked here 30 years, baby. I know when people are playing games. He's not just lying. He planned this. "But no one will believe you," I said quietly. She gave a sad smile. "No one believes the help either, sweetheart." That evening, Doreen called a family meeting. I walked in, hopeful there might be a chance to explain. Instead, I was ambushed. "We've decided," she announced like a judge, "that your presence here is no longer appropriate. You've embarrassed this family." "Based on what?" I asked, standing. "Where's your proof?" "You've done enough," Marvin said. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Celine sat silent. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't say a word. "You are no longer welcome here," Doreen said, "and we expect you to respect that." Just like that, I was out. I left the house with a backpack and a lump in my throat. No goodbyes, no hug from Celine. Marvin turned his back before I even reached the steps. I walked slowly down the gravel driveway, each step heavier than the last. As I reached the mailbox, Minerva was there. still in her apron, her eyes wet but determined. She held out a small bundle wrapped in faded silk. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. When they turned their backs, I didn't ask what it was. I just nodded, took it gently, and kept walking. I didn't look back. Not when the door clicked shut behind me. Not as the soft hum of laughter floated out from the backyard, where lanterns still flickered and champagne glasses clinked like none of it had happened. My legs moved on instinct, each step heavier than the last, my sneakers crunching against the gravel. The silk bundle Minerva handed me felt oddly warm in my hand, like it still carried my grandmother's breath. By the time I reached the end of the driveway, the moon was overhead. The street was quiet. Too quiet. I had no plan, no place to go, not even a change of clothes. I checked my phone, 4% battery, no missed calls, no messages. I tried the first number I could think of, Rachel, a college friend who used to say I was like a sister. Straight to voicemail. The second, Tanya, a coworker from my internship last fall, texted back, "Oh, wow, wish I could but out of town." The third one didn't answer at all. Just rang and rang until I gave up. Eventually, I ended up downtown, not far from the riverfront. I sat on a bench outside a closed bookstore, clutching my backpack like it could protect me from the stares of passers-by. Some glanced over, probably wondering what a young woman was doing alone this late, but no one stopped. The night air cooled quickly, and the concrete beneath me sucked the warmth from my body. I didn't sleep. Not really. I dozed in fits, waking at every noise. The sound of car doors, drunken laughter, a skateboard scraping pavement. More than once I thought about walking home. Just to explain, to beg for a chance to clear it all up. But then, I remembered Doreen's face, the finality in her voice. "You are no longer welcome here." By morning, the streets were slowly filling with joggers and baristas unlocking cafe doors. I wandered into one, hoping to charge my phone and gather myself. The girl behind the counter didn't ask questions. She just poured me a black coffee and slid it across the counter with a quiet, "You look like you've been through hell." I sat in the corner for over an hour, pretending to scroll through emails that didn't exist. No texts, no missed calls, not even from Celine. Eventually, I remembered Mia, a girl I once worked with at a boutique downtown. We weren't close, but she was kind. I found her contact, took a deep breath, and sent a simple text. "I'm in a tough spot. Any chance you have a couch?" She responded 10 minutes later. "You can come by, but just for a night or two, okay?" I thanked her and made my way to her apartment, a small one-bedroom walk-up on the edge of the city. She didn't ask many questions, which I appreciated. The couch was scratchy, but I was grateful. I offered to clean, to cook, to help with anything in exchange. She just shrugged and said, "Just don't bring drama." For the first time in nearly 24 hours, I showered. The hot water stung like a warning, peeling away what was left of the old version of me. I dried off, dressed in the same clothes, and sat down to scroll mindlessly through social media, trying to distract myself. That's when I saw it. Celine's engagement photos had been posted. Dozens of them, golden hour lighting, floral arches, smiles so wide they looked painful. I swiped through them, each one more polished than the last. Then I saw the one that broke me. It was a group shot, taken right after dinner. I remembered standing to Celine's left, arm around her waist, smiling even though my heart had already started to crack. In the posted version, she was on the edge of the frame. And where I had been was nothing but blurred trees and airbrushed shadows. They'd cropped me out. The caption read, "So blessed to be surrounded by the ones who matter most." Heart emoji, #family, #grateful. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone. I just stared until my fingers went numb. Dozens of comments poured in. "Such a beautiful family. Perfect night for a perfect couple. I see where Celine gets her glow." I turned off the screen, laid the phone on the coffee table, and leaned back. My chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out the last piece of me that still wanted to believe I belonged. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a calendar alert. I'd forgotten it was still synced to the family schedule. A brunch, this Saturday. Family check-in at the Millhouse Cafe. For a moment, I actually considered showing up. Just walking in, sitting down, watching their faces shift from shock to discomfort to guilt. But I didn't. Instead, I swiped the alert away and opened the silk bundle Minerva had given me. Inside was a single envelope, sealed with wax and folded neatly. Tucked into the flap was a small card with my grandmother's handwriting. "You'll need this when you're ready." The bus ride out of Chattanooga was the longest 3.5 hours of my life. It wasn't just the ache in my back, or the way my last $40 barely covered the ticket. It was the silence. I didn't talk, didn't cry. I just stared out the window as the trees blurred past, trying to convince myself I hadn't just been erased. I chose Asheville because it was far enough that no one could run into me accidentally, but close enough that I didn't feel like I was disappearing completely. And because of Mia. We'd worked together for one summer at a downtown boutique. Nothing too deep. But she'd been kind when others were competitive, and that counted for something now. When I texted her, she replied in less than 5 minutes. "Come, I have a futon. It's not fancy, but it's yours for a while." She didn't ask too many questions. Just let me in, handed me a towel, and told me to help myself to cereal if I got hungry. I told her I was just passing through, and tried to make it sound like I believed that. That night, after Mia went to bed, I finally opened the silk bundle Minerva had pressed into my hand. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. Inside was a single sealed envelope, thick and sturdy, with Leona's handwriting across the front. "Only when no one else sees you." There was a lump in my throat as I broke the wax seal. Tucked inside was a document, official, notarized, dated 2 months before the engagement party. A prenuptial agreement between Selene and Jacek. My breath caught as I scanned the clauses. He had insisted on full access to her inheritance. Not just a share. Control. Every page had little notes in Leona's unmistakable cursive, underlined phrases, margin scribbles. One in particular stood out. Why would someone this young want control of everything? I sat back, the weight of it settling in. He hadn't just lied about me. He hadn't just manipulated Celine. He had a plan, and the engagement was just another step. He didn't love her. She was leverage, a bridge to a legacy that wasn't his. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind spun in loops, faces, conversations. Words that once felt harmless now rang like alarm bells. But beneath all that spinning, something new was forming. A slow, simmering kind of certainty. A few days later, I walked to a nearby church, more out of habit than faith. It wasn't the place I grew up in. No one knew my name. I just needed to sit somewhere quiet and not explain myself. The pews were half full. The sermon was forgettable. But when it ended, and I lingered a few minutes longer than I meant to, an older woman approached me. Her gray cardigan looked handmade, her eyes sharp. "They turned their backs on me too," she said, like we'd already been introduced in another life. "Not all of us stay silent." I blinked, unsure if she was talking about the sermon or something else entirely. But then she sat beside me, slow and steady. She didn't ask me what happened. She just told me about a man she married at 19, about a mother who refused to believe her when things started to unravel. "It doesn't matter how loud you scream when they've already decided who the villain is," she said. "Keep your papers," she added as we stood to leave. "You'll need them someday, not to win, but to survive with dignity." That walk home felt different. I didn't feel healed or brave or whole, but I felt seen. Back at Mia's, I found an old lockbox buried in the back of her closet, probably left over from some roommate past. I tucked the prenup inside, sealed it shut, and slid it under the futon. Then I pulled out a blank notebook, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened to the first page. I wrote one word: plan, The next morning, after Mia left for work, I made myself coffee and sat at her kitchen table with my laptop. I opened the community college website, found the application form for night classes, and typed in my name. By the third week of sleeping on Mia's futon, the quiet gratitude I'd arrived with had started to rot into something heavier, something that tasted like guilt. I washed every dish before she asked, folded laundry that wasn't mine, and cleaned her already clean bathroom until the grout lines were white again. I did it so I wouldn't feel like a burden. But the truth is, I already did. Mia never complained. She wasn't the type. But kindness has a limit, even when it's never spoken out loud. I knew I was overstaying, and I hated that feeling more than being alone. So I started picking up odd jobs wherever I could. I walked dogs in the sweltering July heat, passed out flyers in front of discount mattress stores, and took on freelance data entry gigs that paid pennies per hour. The schedule was erratic and exhausting, but it gave me something to do that didn't involve looking at Mia's face and wondering if she was secretly counting down the days. When I tried to enroll in a GED night course, the application asked for parental information. I hesitated. I had no current tax return to attach, no FAFSA forms filled, no parental signatures. The system required proof that I existed within someone else's framework, someone who had already erased me. The rejection email came 2 days later. Unfortunately, due to missing documentation, we are unable to process your financial aid request at this time. I stared at it until the words blurred. Without documents, without history, I was nothing more than a name that didn't belong anywhere. That night, I logged into my old online bank account. I needed to close it. There was nothing in there but dust and disappointment, but when I opened the transaction history, something stopped me. A transfer, $2,500, sent 6 days after the engagement party. Voided by Doreen. I clicked the record again. There it was, my grandmother's name in the sender field. And in the comments, for Annalisa, emergency use. My hand went numb around the mouse. She had tried to help me. Even after she passed, even from the grave, Leona had reached for me. And Doreen had intercepted it like it was a casual delivery, not a lifeline. Like it was hers to keep, or to kill. The betrayal hit me harder than anything Yatsek ever said. This was blood. This was supposed to be my mother, and she'd made damn sure I had nothing. Later that week, after a miserable flyer shift downtown, I didn't go back to Mia's right away. I walked, nowhere in particular. Just walked until the clouds rolled in and the air shifted. The first drop hit my cheek while I was standing at a crosswalk, and by the time I reached the library steps, I was soaked to the bone. The building was closed, but I sat under the awning anyway. The plastic bench was cold, slick from the storm, but I didn't care. I whispered it, more to myself than anyone. They really made sure I had nothing. The words sat there in the air between me and the rain. Then I remembered the woman at church. Her cardigan. Her calm voice. Not all of us stay silent. The next morning, I dried off an old pair of jeans, pulled on a hoodie, and marched back to the library. Not to cry, but to act. I registered for a library card, filled out a new night school application that didn't depend on my parents, and asked the clerk if they had any test prep books. I didn't wait for anyone's permission, not Mia's, not the state's. I'd failed at playing polite. Now I was playing for survival. Back at the apartment, I cleared the coffee table and laid out my plan. Schedule, budget, resources. Nothing fancy, just a blueprint that didn't include their names. I stopped asking for help that week, not because I didn't need it, but because I knew I'd never forget the look on Doreen's face when she threw me out, like I was already forgotten. That night, as Mia worked late, I packed up my scattered belongings into a single duffel bag and tucked it against the wall. I wasn't leaving yet, but I wanted to be ready. No more borrowing space. No more swallowing silence. They would never get to say I failed. A few days later, I stood outside the school's orientation office, my application clutched in one hand and my breath steadying in the other. Through the glass, I caught my reflection. hair damp from the drizzle, eyes a little more tired than before. But mine. Unapologetically mine. They left me behind, I whispered, then opened the door. But I'm walking ahead now. The night classes started in early October, just as the evenings turned crisp and the leaves in Asheville caught fire in orange and rust. I'd show up to the small community college building straight from my afternoon shifts, hair pulled back, hands still smelling faintly of printer ink or cheap soap from the coffee shop. I didn't mind. It felt like something real, something mine. The coursework wasn't easy, not with a mind still bruised from months of silence and starting over. But it gave me direction. Every statute, every case summary, every lecture on client confidentiality felt like a piece of armor I was slowly strapping to myself. I was no longer floating through someone else's story. I was scripting my own. I changed my phone number, blocked every contact that tied me to the past. Even Mia, as generous as she had been, respected the distance I drew. We still shared the apartment for a little while longer, but I kept to my corner, studying by the soft light of a desk lamp long after the city quieted down. It was on one of those late nights, barely past 10, but already deep in darkness, when I saw her again. Tamsin, my childhood neighbor, the one who used to braid my hair on the porch and split popsicles during the summer. She stood at the campus cafe counter, tapping her student ID against the machine, her eyes darting around until they locked on mine. There was a beat. Not long, but waited. "I thought that was you," she said, unsure if she should smile or apologize. We sat for coffee, awkward at first. She didn't ask where I'd been. I didn't offer. She stirred her cup, then looked me straight on. "I should have reached out," she admitted. "Back then, after everything came out, I didn't know who to believe. But I never forgot the way Selene treated you when we were kids. She always wanted the spotlight, always pushed you out of it." I shrugged. It's easier to believe the loudest voice. A few days later, she messaged me. "I found something," the text read. "Was going through boxes from my parents' attic. Thought you might want it." What she brought me was a shoebox. Inside, among concert wristbands and high school essays, was my old diary, one I hadn't seen in over a decade. Leather-bound, navy blue, the corners fraying like it had been held too many times without being opened. When I flipped through it, my stomach knotted. There it was. Entry after entry from when I was 16, 17, memories I thought I'd buried. Jacek, long before he and Selene became official, making comments. "You're not like your sister," he once said. "You've got a quiet kind of pretty." At the time, I thought it was weird. I wrote, "I don't like the way he looks at me when Selene isn't around." No one ever read it. Until now. I scanned a few pages and saved them to my drive. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed truth. Tangible, dated, indisputable truth. With new resolve, I applied to assist a local law firm, entry-level case research, contract work. They gave me a trial file, then another, then another. Soon, I was logging more hours with them than I was at my cafe job. One afternoon, the senior partner, gray hair, firm voice, never smiled, slid a folder across the desk. "Whoever taught you how to organize briefs deserves a raise," he said. I wanted to tell him no one taught me. Life did. The pay was modest, but enough. I started saving. Moved into a small studio. Just one room with a mattress on the floor, a desk, and my name on the lease. For the first time in months, I slept without hearing someone else's footsteps in the hallway. I cut my hair. Not out of rebellion, but because I didn't want to look like her anymore. Selene. Gone was the long, dark curtain. What remained was sharp, angled, intentional. I bought a used iPhone with the money from my first real paycheck. Changed the wallpaper to a photo of a tree-lined trail near the Blue Ridge Parkway. Something I'd walked alone. Something no one could crop me out of. In the mirror, I didn't see the girl they threw out of that house. I saw someone they wouldn't recognize now, even if they tried. "I didn't just survive them," I whispered one night. watching the steam rise from my tea. I outran their version of me. That night, I took the scanned diary page, the one with the most damning entry, and uploaded it to an encrypted cloud folder. I labeled it simply, "If they ever come back." Then I closed the laptop, took a long breath, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. The message came at 11:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed twice. Unknown number, no context, just one line. "Check Reddit, search your sister's fiancé." I froze, toothbrush in hand. Every instinct told me to delete it, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But curiosity, maybe even something closer to self-preservation, got the better of me. I rinsed my mouth, walked back to the couch, and typed his name into the search bar. There it was. A video, front and center. Title: CEO screams at female employee during private tech panel. And the thumbnail? Jacek, red-faced, leaning over a table, finger pointed. I tapped play. The audio wasn't crystal clear, but the rage came through in every syllable. "If you can't handle this, maybe this job isn't for you," he snapped. "Maybe you should stick to Instagram filters and coffee runs." The woman, early 20s, visibly shaken, tried to respond, but he cut her off again. "Don't talk over me. I don't care what you think you heard." The video ended with a silent cut. Below it, the comments were relentless. Classic fragile ego. Why do these guys always look like they peaked in high school? Celine's gonna regret this one. And that was just the start. By morning, TikTok had already stitched the video a dozen ways. Legal creators broke down his behavior. HR specialists chimed in. Trauma therapists talked about psychological intimidation in corporate spaces. One creator simply stared at the clip for 30 seconds and whispered, "Run, girl." By noon, someone had posted screenshots of his company's Glassdoor reviews, anonymous entries describing a hostile work environment, excessive NDAs, women quitting mid-project with no explanation. Each entry painted a picture I already knew by heart. Celine's Instagram account disappeared sometime that afternoon. No warning, no note, just gone. I didn't post anything, didn't retweet, didn't even hit like. Instead, I sat at my desk, staring at the prenup I'd reread more times than I could count. Why would someone this young want control of everything? Leona had asked that in the margins. Now the world was asking too. Mia noticed me, scrolling, and raised an eyebrow. "You're gonna say something?" I shook my head. Let him implode. My story doesn't need to be in that mess, yet. She poured coffee, sat across from me. It's wild how silence can be louder than screaming. Later that week, I got a DM from someone I hadn't talked to since high school. Jenna. She'd been close to Celine once. "Hey, not trying to pry, but she's not doing great, asking a lot about you lately." "Like what?" I typed. "She wants to know if you've said anything to anyone. She's paranoid." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I reopened the prenup file and bookmarked the section where Jacek had added a clause granting him legal power over Celine's real estate assets in the event of marriage dissolution. Not divorce, dissolution. It was deliberate, chillingly transactional. I printed it, highlighted it, filed it. At the same time, work was shifting. A case I'd helped compile was cited in a successful court motion. The senior associate at the firm sent me a short email. "You made that motion airtight. We'll be in touch." And they were. 2 days later, I was offered a formal part-time position, flexible hours, better pay, and a badge with my name on it. I walked out of the office that day and let the sun hit my face for the first time in what felt like months. That night, just after dinner, my phone lit up again. Another unknown number. This time, it came with an attachment. Text. "He's lying to your family again. Thought you should know." There was a voice memo. I sat at the edge of my bed and pressed play. Jacek's voice, unmistakable. Calm, smooth, snake-like. "She's been obsessed with me for years," he said. "Tried to get between us. I had to draw a line. I hit pause, and I didn't even blink. The first call came just after lunch on a Thursday. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't recognize the number, and these days I only answered when I had to. The message that followed made my stomach twist. "It's your mother. We need to talk. It's about Celine." "No, hi. No, I hope you're doing okay." Just clipped, measured words. I played it twice before deleting it, then stared at my phone in disbelief. Not even 2 hours later, an email followed. Subject line: "Family emergency." The attachment? A scan of a formal document titled "Request for Legal Assessment, Privacy Concerns and Image Protection." I scrolled through it. Celine's name. Jacek's too. Some reference to public harassment and media speculation. And at the end, a note. Seeking input from Annalisa as a neutral legal consultant familiar with recent developments. Neutral. I didn't reply immediately. I needed to think. But that night, I agreed to a video call. If nothing else, I wanted to see their faces. Wanted to look them in the eye from my own space, on my own terms. When the call connected, both of them were already there. Marvin sat stiffly, arms crossed. Doreen wore a pale blouse I remembered from family holidays, her expression carefully blank. "We appreciate you making time," Marvin began, as if we were strangers negotiating a parking dispute. Doreen chimed in. "We understand you've gained some experience, and given your sister's situation, we hoped you could offer insight." Discreetly. I stared. "You mean legal advice?" "Well, yes," Marvin said, "but more personal context, too. You know how quickly these things spiral online." "Celine is struggling," Doreen added, "and we know you're doing well now." The silence that followed was thick. I could hear my own breath, slow and steady. "No one's apologized," I said. Doreen flinched, just barely. "This isn't about the past." "But you're asking me to fix the consequences of it," I replied. They avoided my gaze. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. "You didn't expect me to survive," I said flatly. "That's the only reason you're here now." Marvin opened his mouth, but said nothing. Doreen's face hardened. She ended the call first. That night, just past midnight, the phone rang again. I answered on the third ring. Her voice was different this time. "I wanted to believe you," she said softly. "But the shame, I didn't know how to face it. I thought if we shut the door, it would go away." I didn't respond. "I still see you, you know," she continued, her voice trembling. "On the porch. You didn't say a word, just walked. That night, it plays in my head. Over and over." I closed my eyes. The silence between us stretched long and fragile. "I should have done something," she whispered. "But I didn't." There was a pause. A waiting, like she was hoping I'd meet her halfway. I didn't. "I hope you'll consider helping," she said finally, her voice almost gone. "For Celine, if not for us." When the line went dead, I sat in the dark, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room. I didn't feel satisfaction, or even anger, just fatigue. A deep, bone-worn tiredness from years of carrying the cost of their silence. The next morning, I played the voicemail again, and again, until the words lost shape. "They don't want to fix anything," I murmured aloud. "They want to survive the storm they made." Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop, started a new email draft. The subject line was simple. "This isn't forgiveness. This is a contract." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then slowly, deliberately, I typed the opening line. "If you want my help, here are my terms." I typed the subject line carefully. Counsel response. Annalisa Barrett. Beneath it, one sentence. "All future communications should be directed through my legal representative." Attached were 2 PDFs. The first, a redacted copy of the prenup, scanned cleanly from the file Leona had preserved. The second, a single dated page from my teenage diary, anonymized but legible. No commentary, no threats, just time-stamped facts they couldn't spin. Barrett forwarded the email before I could hesitate. The fallout didn't take long. The firm that once sponsored Jacek's ventures scrubbed his photo from their website within 24 hours. A quiet statement followed. We are reviewing our relationship with Mr. Wroblewski in light of recent findings. Whispers rippled across social media. Business analysts speculated about ethical breaches. One headline read, "Tech Darling or Tactical Predator, inside the pre-wedding deal that sparked a legal war." Celine and Jacek were summoned by their legal team. Several calls and email chains later, I heard from someone in their circle that a formal review was underway. "They're rattled," the message said. "He thought no one had a copy." I didn't reply. Instead, I printed a copy of my own documents and slipped them into a fresh manila folder. Preparation wasn't revenge. It was preservation. Then came Marvin. He left a voicemail. No greeting this time, just 4 words. "What have you done?" I didn't call back, but I did forward the recording to Barrett, who smirked when he listened. "You gave them 5 years of silence," he said. "They earned this sound." 2 weeks later, I flew to Chattanooga. The courthouse wasn't unfamiliar, but the feeling of walking in as a documented party instead of a family embarrassment was new. Barrett met me on the courthouse steps. "We're just observing today," he reminded me. "You don't have to speak unless they force it." I nodded. Inside, the emergency petition from Marvin and Doreen to shield certain family assets was read aloud. They cited privacy, emotional distress, even the ongoing trauma their family had endured since public accusations surfaced. The judge listened quietly. Barrett stood when called, calm, precise. "Your Honor, the petitioner failed to disclose existing financial documents pertinent to this case, including a prenuptial agreement dated months before public acknowledgement of the engagement. Additionally, material evidence was deliberately withheld from a third party who was legally entitled to it." He placed the envelope on the desk like it weighed nothing. The courtroom stilled. The judge didn't flinch. "Petition denied," she said simply, "due to demonstrated conflict of interest and non-disclosure of key financial documentation." Marvin's jaw twitched. Doreen said nothing, not even when the gavel fell. She left the room before the judge finished her closing remarks. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky smeared with the gold of a late autumn afternoon. As we descended the steps, Barrett leaned close and murmured, "And we're just getting started." Jacek passed us near the parking lot. He didn't speak. Celine trailed behind him, shoulders slumped, her gaze locked on the pavement. I didn't stop to look back. That evening, back in Asheville, I retrieved my mail. Among bills and flyers was a letter in an envelope I didn't recognize. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. My breath caught. The return address, one I hadn't seen since high school. A nursing home 2 counties over. The sender's name, Margaret Temple, Celine's godmother. Inside, a folded sheet of stationery and a single line written in looping script. Celine. The envelope sat untouched on my kitchen table for 3 hours. I'd walked past it, made tea, organized files, even scrubbed the stovetop. Anything but face what I already suspected. Eventually, I pulled out the chair and sat. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, Celine's, slanted cursive with a nervous shake in the strokes. My fingers hesitated only a second before breaking the seal. The first line, "I never deserved to be called your sister." She didn't waste space with pleasantries. No excuse, no denial. Just a flood of ink and guilt. She'd left him, Jacek, packed her bags 3 weeks earlier and hadn't told anyone. Said she was writing from a rented apartment with second-hand furniture and no plan beyond making it to the next day. "I saw the clip," she wrote. "I saw what you've been seeing for years. I couldn't ignore it anymore." She admitted to knowing about the prenup. Not just in hindsight. She'd seen the original draft and chose not to question it. "Being adored felt better than being right," she wrote. "And I was so scared of what would happen if I stopped pretending I didn't notice the manipulation." The letter turned confessional. She described how he'd gradually taken over her finances, her schedule, even her friends. If it didn't serve him, it stopped being part of my life. Then came the part I wasn't sure I wanted, but needed to read. I saw what he did to you. I heard what Minerva said that day. I knew it was a lie. But I said nothing, because if I defended you, I would have had to admit everything else I was ignoring too. She said the silence was easier, that watching me walk out of our family's life was easier than defending me and watching him walk out of hers. I thought if I held on to him, I wouldn't have to feel second best to you anymore. I let the letter sit on the table. My tea had gone cold. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't respond. Instead, I thought about the version of me she knew, the one who stayed quiet, who tried to make herself smaller so Selene could shine, the one who made room. Over and over, I missed that girl, not because she was weak, but because she didn't know what it felt like to be dismantled by people who claimed to love her. I didn't need her anymore, but I mourned her, just the same. A few days passed. Mia noticed the shift. She caught me lingering longer in the hallway, reading the letter one more time. "You okay?" she asked one evening as we folded laundry together. "Yeah," I said. "I just realized I don't need to fight anymore." I unpinned the old photo from my mirror that night, one of Selene and me as kids, in matching dresses at a wedding. I replaced it with the certificate from my paralegal course. It didn't shimmer, it wasn't gold embossed, but it was mine. Later that week, I found myself in a thrift shop on the edge of town. I picked out a simple wood frame, one with a faint crack along the side. Imperfect, but strong. That night, I placed the certificate inside, then hung it in the hallway of my studio. Not for guests, just for me. A silent testament. It was around 9 p.m. when the group text came through. My phone lit up while I was reading on the couch. From Marvin. "We'd like to come visit, all of us. We think it's time." I stared at the message. No emotion, no reaction, just choice. I didn't reply to Marvin's message. No thumbs up, no, "Let me think about it," not even a single word. I sat with the phone in my hand, the text blinking at me like it was entitled to a response. I watched it until the screen dimmed and the message disappeared into the background of my life, just like the people who sent it. The next morning, I called Barrett. "If they want to visit," I told him, "they do it through the court. Formal setting, terms outlined, everything documented." "You're sure?" he asked. "That'll go over like a lead balloon." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. It's not meant to go over well. Within 48 hours, Barrett drafted the paperwork, visitation terms, communication boundaries, and a clearly stated clause. No contact with the child unless agreed upon in writing by Annalisa Barrett. There would be no informal brunches, no warm reunions, no photos for show. "This is going to sting," Barrett warned. "I want them to feel it," I said. "Not because I'm angry, because I'm done being their shadow." That same week, I got an email from a podcast producer. The subject line read, "Family Lies, Stories from the Inside." She'd heard about my name through someone at the courthouse, heard whispers. She asked if I'd be willing to speak, not for scandal, but for survivors. At first, I ignored it. The idea of rehashing everything in a format people consumed over morning coffee and dog walks made my skin crawl. But 2 days later, I emailed her back. "I'll do it," I wrote, "but no names, no locations, and no tears, just facts." The day of the recording, they sent a technician to set up the mic in my home office. It felt surreal. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't dress up. I spoke into the microphone like I was writing a letter to someone who needed to hear the truth, because maybe they'd survived something similar. When we finished, the producer sat in silence. Then she leaned forward and said, "That was the most terrifyingly calm story I've ever recorded." The episode aired the following Monday. I didn't tell anyone, but it found its way. By the end of the week, I had 100 new messages in my inbox. Anonymous notes, brief confessions, shared pain. Strangers thanked me for speaking what they couldn't. Then came the email from Doreen. One line. You made us look like monsters. No greeting, no signature, no apology. I archived it without a second thought. Marvin tried to call. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. I didn't listen. Celine never responded at all. And somehow, that silence felt louder than everything else. That Friday, just as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I walked out to the patio to bring in a basket of folded clothes. There was a box on my doormat. No postage, no return address. Inside, a baby blanket, cream-colored, soft, and embroidered across one corner in delicate blue thread. Leona. No card, no note. Just that name. I walked inside, folded the blanket, and placed it on the back of the rocking chair in the nursery. Through the window, I watched my daughter in the backyard, stumbling after a butterfly with giggles echoing off the fence. She didn't know the war I'd fought. She didn't need to. She was mine, whole, unblemished by legacy, and she would never beg anyone to love her. Silent, but no longer alone. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed and faded. My hand hovered above the keyboard for longer than I'd admit, typing and deleting, starting sentences I never intended to send. Every draft circled the same things: explanations, restrained rage, a hint of cautious compassion. But in the end, I typed a single line. I'm not ready to let you near her. Then I hit send. No follow-up, no commentary, just a line of truth, clean and final. Marvin replied the next morning. 3 words. We understand. Respectfully. There was no apology. No effort beyond that half gesture of civility. Just silence. Doreen never wrote. No email, no card. Not even her usual passive-aggressive forwarding of news articles with vague captions like, "Thought this might interest you." She vanished. Intentionally or out of shame, I couldn't say. But Celine did reach out. Not with words. Just a blank email. No body, no attachment. The subject line simply read, "Thank you." I didn't reply. That weekend, Leona and I walked to a park nearby. She toddled toward the swings, her curls bouncing with every unsteady step. I sat on the bench and watched her, sunlight catching on her eyelashes, her face open and unafraid. I thought of the name I gave her. I named her Leona because she was the only one who saw me before I disappeared. Not Celine. Not Marvin. Certainly not Doreen. Leona, my grandmother, had been the only one who looked at me without seeing a burden or a rival or a tool to use. She saw me and believed in me. I gave that name to my daughter like a promise, like armor she wouldn't even know she wore. That night, after I tucked Leona into bed, I opened the old cedar box buried deep in the closet. It still smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine. Inside were scattered photos, frozen moments from a childhood I no longer recognized. There was one of me at 14, alone at a school play. My smile was small, eyes strained. I remembered thinking someone might notice if I didn't show up. They didn't. I placed that photo beside a new one. Me, Leona, and Mia, laughing on the steps outside the courthouse after I officially incorporated my consulting firm. I framed both, side by side, not because they matched, but because they told the truth. I hung them in my hallway, across from the bathroom mirror, where I would see them every day. One girl disappeared. The other survived. I started volunteering that month at a nonprofit for women estranged from their families. The first session, I just sat and listened. The women told their stories, some with shaking voices, some with practiced detachment. I said nothing. They didn't need my pain. They needed to know they weren't alone in theirs. Eventually, I spoke. I told them how you can grow a garden in the dirt someone tried to bury you in, not with revenge, but with roots. We met every Thursday. Over time, the stories began to fold into each other. It didn't matter if it was a mother or a father, a brother or a church. They all had the same rhythm: betrayal, grief, silence, reinvention. Late one evening, after putting Leona to sleep, I sat with a cup of tea at my laptop. The house was quiet, soft with the hum of the fridge and the faint rattle of wind against the window. My email pinged. The sender, Marvin. Subject: "We'll be in town for the weekend, just in case you've changed your mind." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I closed the screen, stood, and walked into Leona's room. She was fast asleep, cheeks flushed, mouth slightly open. I whispered into the room, more for me than her. She's already loved. She doesn't need to be begged for. The letter came in a flat legal envelope. Stiff paper, plain font, no emotion. The estate was being finalized. My parents were selling the house. It didn't sting the way it used to. In fact, the timing felt clean. Not perfect, but aligned. I hadn't stepped foot inside that house in over 2 years, and yet the thought of it being scrubbed of us completely still tightened something small in my chest. I didn't tell them I was coming. Just booked a rental car, packed a small overnight bag, and drove south. The house looked the same. That dull beige siding, the old hydrangea bushes flattened by cold. The mailbox still had the metal flag rusted in place. I parked 2 houses down and walked the rest of the way. The front door creaked open, with the same sound it always had, like it resented movement. I let myself in quietly. No photos on the walls anymore. No coats by the door. Just blank space and the echo of old decisions. My room was untouched, almost unsettling in its preservation. The same pale yellow bedspread. The same bookshelf, with my name carved into the underside of the second shelf. But the photo that once hung above my desk, our last full family picture, was gone. I didn't look for it. I moved room to room, not for nostalgia, but for closure. In the kitchen, I ran my hand over the dining table, remembering the night they told me to leave. The tension, the tremble in Celine's jaw, Marvin's eyes darting, Doreen folding a napkin again and again until it looked like a threat. I stepped into the hallway, hesitated at the small drawer beside the linen closet, my grandmother's drawer. It was where she'd kept holiday cards, shopping lists, crossword puzzles, and eventually, secrets. I opened it slowly. There, tucked in the back, was a small cream envelope with my name on it. The handwriting was hers. I knew before I even picked it up. If she ever comes back, give her this. Inside, one short note. You were always more than they could handle. That was their failure, not yours. I sat on the edge of the stairs and let the words settle into my chest. Not loud, not angry, just true. Before leaving, I walked to the living room. The mantel was still there, same stonework, same dusty corners. A framed photo of Selene and Jacek sat askew on the edge. The glass was cracked. No one had bothered to fix it. I took it down. From my bag, I pulled a new frame, wooden, hand-carved, simple. Inside was a photo of me, Leona, and Mia on a hike last spring. We were sweaty, sunburned, happy. I placed it in the center of the mantel. Not as a declaration, not as revenge, just correction. Back in Asheville, a week later, I hosted a quiet dinner. Mia brought wine. Barrett brought dessert. A couple from my volunteer circle joined with their toddler. Leona crawled from lap to lap, laughing at everyone's laughter. I looked around the room, mismatched chairs, secondhand plates, warmth spilling from the windows, and thought, this is what a family looks like. Not the one you're born into, the one you build. Family isn't who claims you when it's easy, I told Barrett as we washed dishes later. It's who chooses you when it's hard. He nodded, passing me a towel. They chose well. That night, I packed a final box of old keepsakes into the attic. Yearbooks, letters, a few trinkets I wasn't ready to toss, but didn't need to see every day. I sealed it, labeled it passed, and turned off the light. Outside on the porch, I sat with Leona sleeping on my chest. The air was crisp. Stars dotted the sky like quiet witnesses. They wanted me erased, I whispered into the night. But here I am, unwritten by their hands, but fully mine. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones no one sees. We survive in silence, rebuild without applause, and learn to carry the weight of stories too painful to retell. But healing doesn't always come in big moments. It comes in the quiet, when you stand your ground, define your worth, and choose not to chase what once rejected you. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been silenced, dismissed, or told your truth was inconvenient, please know this: you're not alone. You're not the shame. You're the one who walked through fire and built something no one can take. And maybe, like me, you've learned that family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up when it's hardest. It's about who stays when it costs them something. So let me ask you, what story are you carrying quietly? And what would happen if, just once, you told it out loud? If this video touched you in any way, drop a 1 in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, tell me why. I read every message. Most importantly, if this story moved you or made you feel seen, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay with us. We've got more stories coming, stories that speak the truth, spark hope, and remind us all what it means to keep going. Thank you for listening. Your story matters too.